Republican announcing his bid to run in 2012.
That's right. Former Minnesota Governor Tim Pawlenty made his candidacy official just this week. We're very pleased to have him with us this morning. Governor, welcome. Thanks so much for being with us.
Yeah, it's good to be here with you.
I know that people don't put a lot of stock in the early polls, but Gallup has you polling right now at about 6%, and you see candidates like Romney and Palin at least in double digits. You seem to have a lot of ground to make up. What do you think?
Well, what I think is this. I'm the new face on the scene. Most of these folks have run before, have had some national prominence, and the early polls mostly just measure name ID, and half the Republicans in the country don't even know who I am. So I like the fact that there's these folks who are established, well-known, and yet there's no real favorite in the race. And so there's a ton of upside for my candidacy, and it gives me a chance to introduce myself and put my record from Minnesota out there, which is cutting taxes, reducing spending, reforming government, including entitlement programs. And as we get known, we're getting good support, particularly in the early states.
More well-known perhaps is Sarah Palin, someone who has served as governor a much shorter period of time than you did. She's talking about a bus tour. Do you think that Sarah Palin and others should just get in the race? Do you think this flirtation with running for president maybe taking some of the attention away from the declared candidates?
Well, whoever's going to get in the race, I welcome them, whether it's Mitt, Sarah, Michelle. But soon we have to make sure we have the debate on the issues. This isn't going to be about rallies or bus tours or anything else. This is going to be about a country that is sinking in debt and deficit. We want to have a leader who's actually tackled those issues and doesn't just talk about it, but's actually got it done. And so what I can bring to the table is not just this blue-collar record, which is the American story for me, but also a record as governor of tackling many of the same issues that the country faces and getting them done. And we got to focus on that, because if these early polls were predictors of who's going to be the next president, and they mostly just recognize name ID at this point, Rudy Giuliani and Howard Dean would be president. They're terrible predictors of who's actually going to win.
We welcome this conversation on the issues, particularly on the financial issues that are at the top of everybody's list. And you talked about debt and deficit and your history with that. Is it feasible, if you became president, to tackle the deficits and the debt in this country and really not increase taxes?
Well, Allie, if you look where the money goes, and you look at a pie chart of where the money goes, there's 2 or 3 big programs where most of the money goes, and you have to address Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and if we're not willing to say it and we're not willing to do it, then we're just wasting each other's time.
Paul Ryan started saying it. Are you on board with what Paul Ryan is talking about with Medicare?
I applaud Paul Ryan in the direction that he's headed. I'm going to have my own plan. It's going to have some differences. For example, he chose not to address Social Security. We will. And this is part of its time for the truth tour.
You want to raise the retirement age, and would you benefit, or would you means test benefits for seniors, so somebody who is wealthier maybe wouldn't get as much as somebody else?
Well, what we've said for Social Security is this: anybody who's on the program or near retirement wouldn't be affected. Stays the same for them. But for the next generation, the ones who are coming into the workforce, we're going to gradually raise the retirement age over time. We have to. We're also going to means test part of the program, the COLA, the cost of living adjustment. So if you're wealthy, you won't get that, and down the list. But the point is this: this country is sinking in debt. And every second they spend $40,000 of debt. Every dollar the federal government spends, 40% of it is debt. And we got a president who won't really address these issues. We've got a country that needs to be prepared and ready to act on these issues, or we're not going to have the country. We got a president who has a campaign plan, but he doesn't have an economic plan.
I want to ask you about that, because, I mean, there was just a huge back and forth, a lot of test of wills, really, in Congress. And they did hammer out at least something that seemed to indicate they were going to talk about major cuts to the tune of billions of dollars. What about the president, do you say, is not honest when it comes to explaining to people how he's going to plan to cut the deficit?
We don't need to be talking about billions of dollars of cuts. It's going to have to be hundreds of billions and maybe even $1 trillion. They take in at the federal government level $2.2 trillion a year or so, and they're spending $3.7 trillion. We don't have 20 years, and we don't have time for more status quo politicians to just come here and say, we don't have to make any tough choices, because any doofus can go to Washington and maintain the status quo. And that's what we've got in the White House and the Congress in terms of their attitude about their willingness to tackle these issues. They're just saying it's all going to be okay. You don't have to do anything big. Don't worry about it. We don't have to change Social Security. We don't have to change Medicare. We don't have to change any of the entitlement program. Yes, we do. And if we're not going to have leaders who are going to say that and do it and tell the American people, look them in the eye, it's time for the truth, then we're all wasting our time. You might as well, Allie, come back to Minnesota and drink beer and play hockey with me, but that's not what this is about.
Always happy to go back. But let's talk about this for a second. Between Barack Obama, who is a formidable politician, and some of these names we're talking about getting into the Republican race, how do you contend with some of the, I don't know if they're criticisms or you welcome them, the fact that you're more like an average guy?
I welcome that. I'm not running for comedian-in-chief or entertainer-in-chief. I'm not, going going to light my hair on fire and shoot sparks out my ears or whatever. This is a country that faces big challenges. We need seasoned, experienced leaders who know how to tackle problems and get the job done. That's what my record reflects. And if you want the comedian-in-chief, if you want the entertainer-in-chief, vote for somebody else. But if you want to get the country back on track, vote for me.
I want to ask you about the primary, about getting out of the GOP primary in general. If Sarah Palin or Michelle Bachmann enter the race, does it change your strategy?
No. Whether it's Michelle or Sarah, there's going to be a big swath for people to compete. And I'm going to be the only candidate in the race on the Republican side that can unite the whole coalition. So on the Republican side, you have economic conservatives, social conservatives, libertarian conservatives.
How do you get the money? You got to win Iowa. You got to win Iowa. If Sarah Palin jumps in the race, it's hard.
We'll have the money to compete in the early states for sure.
If you're a betting man for the CNN the debate in New Hampshire next month, who do you think you're standing up there with?
About 20 people. I mean, there's going to be a lot of
you have a sense of what it's going to look like. Well,
it'll sort out. It'll sort out. But these know that the early states, will have enough money to be successful in the early states. And as I get known, we're getting good traction. And so just keep an eye on these polls, not now, but see what they look like a year from now.
We'll have a clearer picture of which one of your Republican colleagues will be joining you on that stage next month.
Nice talking to you, Governor.
Okay.
Thanks so much
Thanks
for joining us
having me
this
in.
morning.
I appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
49 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back.